The general premise of this panel is to talk about the likely evolution of AR and VR, where it's going. We have about an hour, so we're just going to give you the highlights. We have a pretty amazing and diverse panel. Everyone on here is doing something pretty progressive, but generally in different areas of the medium. So I'll introduce everybody. I'll ask them to kind of talk about what they're doing specifically that's pushing the medium forward, that's nodding to the future of the business. Then a couple follow-up questions, and I'll try to open it up if we have some time to everybody here. So first, we have Michael Kaplan down at the end there, who's Senior Manager, Global Media and Entertainment Business Development for NVIDIA. NVIDIA, that's right. World leader in visual computing. Mike's got 2 decades of experience in technology industry focused on media and entertainment market. Then next, we have Bo Bigol, right there. Bo his resume is pretty crazy. He's VP Global Head of Media and Technology Labs for Huawei. He handles R&D, whose mission is to create the future of media experience through innovations in ultra-high efficiency compression, computer vision and hearing, 3D modeling, augmented virtual reality, full field communications, and personalized responsive media. Previously, he was Senior Director at Samsung at the User Experience Center. He's got 30 patents in technology. The list goes on. You can read about him in your program.
Thanks, Sean. That's really nice.
I was going to keep going, but
that's plenty.
We only have an hour. Next, we have Timothy Dodd. Timothy's SVP, Head of Corporate Development and Strategy at Technicolor. As Head of Corporate Development and Strategy, Tim leads partnerships for Technicolor worldwide, significant leadership experience in digital media. Worked at Warner Brothers. Forward to hearing what Technicolor is doing. Sure. Next, we have Randall Fleiser, famous person in the movie industry. First feature he did was in Grease, the most successful musical ever made. Then The Blue Lagoon, one of my favorites, The Boy in the Plastic Bubble, Summer Lovers, and Santorini. In 2010, he was elected to the Science and Technology Committee for the Academy of Motion Picture and Arts. And now he is taking his talent to the VR space. He's going to tell us about that in a second. And lastly, we have Chilla Cosmo Anderson, who's in for Guido today. And, well, tell us about, I don't have your bio, so can you give us a...
Sure. So my role is content relations, which means that I'm working with the creatives to introduce our technology and have a production team that integrates with creative production teams on set to help them to use our camera, which is the Ozo camera from Nokia, as well as the other technologies, software technologies around it.
So, since I already have you going here, talk about, so I'd like everybody to kind of talk about their project and what they're doing and how it's pushing the medium forward. Talk about the Ozo camera and how that's sort of enhancing the media.
Sure. So Ozo is a purposely built virtual reality camera, and it's targeting towards the professional industries. So movies, documentaries, but also live productions. We have actually a technology for to stream live from Ozo, which is an 8-camera rig. It's basically looks like, I don't have it with me, but it basically looks like a small ball, and the 8 cameras are evenly distributed around that ball, and it has also 8 spatial microphones. And
we got a picture.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Perfect.
maybe not the best picture, but yeah.
That's great.
There it is.
Thank you so much. That's great.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan.
So it's got 8 cameras around it.
Yeah. So we can shoot on, record on board on the camera, so you can use it untethered, or you can use a real-time monitoring technology with it. Then you have to be tethered with the camera. But it's really a great tool for directors to be able to see what's happening on set, because as you know, 360, when you shoot 360, the camera will see everything, so you don't want to be seeing the production crew, therefore usually would be hiding behind that wall here or outside on the corridor, and then the director can have a view on a HMD or a monitor how this production is going and what the viewer going to see on the HMDs.
Is there sound integrated into this as
Yeah,
well?
yeah. It has eight microphones, so you can record sound with it, but you can also integrate in our post-production software externally recorded audio.
And then what's the cost for this?
The cost for the camera currently $45,000.
Nice.
And I want to mention also that we shot some great productions lately with the camera. One won the Proto Awards a week ago, which is Argos, which we collaborated on with the Magnopus team, and that won the best live action for VR at the Proto Awards. And then we also released a music video with One Republic recently, which has been a great hit on multiple platforms. It got almost 1 million views on YouTube, the VR video itself. So it's been, the camera has been used quite widely also for live productions, for live sports, from ESPN to UEFA in Europe, live concerts, Austin City Limits a couple of weeks ago. So a lot of versatile use.
Great, thanks. So let's go to Bo right now. Bo, he's got some, these aren't
Sure.
necessarily your projects, these are just projects you think that are really pushing the medium forward.
Right. So at Huawei, Huawei is traditionally a network equipment company, and now recently we've had a lot of success with smartphones. But still, we see ourselves as we're not the camera makers like Nokia or Google Jump, you know, GoPro Array, and there's a number of 360 video cameras out there. And what Huawei's trying to do, though, is bridge that connection between the camera and the consumer, right? So my lab's focus in particular is on compression, transport, protection, adaptive streaming, and all this in the face of, you know, variable network conditions. And we're also looking at what's the future of VR video experiences that are going to push the bandwidth requirements in networking and be prepared for that. So Huawei is big behind the 5G wireless networking, which will come out around 2020, which is about the time we think VR content will be mainstream, you know, be widespread use. I mean, it's becoming mainstream already, but by 2020, it should be big, and it'll be pushing the bandwidth, so 5G wireless will come right in time. So I wanted to show a couple examples of, you know, in addition to the 360 video experience that the Nokia Ozo provides, there's another kind of VR video we call volumetric video, and there's some examples of it out today, but it's not very common because it's really expensive to put together. It requires arrays of cameras. This is a clip from the Super Bowl this year that was produced by Replay TV, which is a company that Intel bought right around the same time, around February. Anyway, what they're doing here is they're using 32 5K cameras in this arena, in this sports arena, Levi Stadium in San Jose. And they're capturing 32 different views of this play on the field. Then they're constructing a rudimentary 3D model of the players and doing, you know, bitmap stitching to enable this virtual pan around the entire scene, right? So the way it's happening today, though, is it requires a high amount of computation and post-production in order to produce this one scene. But in the future, it's going to be possible to use your Tango tablet or your VR headset for an individual consumer to pick their individual view of the play. So if you wanted to look more closely, zoom in on some particular aspect here that the producers wouldn't have thought of producing in advance, you should be able to do that. To make that happen, though, we have to stream 32 5K resolution video feeds to every consumer so that they can select, they can reconstruct their own individual view of it. Now, I'm exaggerating. There's ways to do that more efficiently. but effectively, that's the kind of thing that has to happen, and that's why we're working on network architectures and compression algorithms to make that possible. So I want to show one other quick example, which is in the same vein, but it's more of a consumer application here. Well, actually, sports viewing is mainstream consumer, but this is from Microsoft Research, a project they called holoportation. What's happening here is this guy's daughter is in another space. This is just a research prototype. It's not a product, but it was in fact implemented, and it's possible to do with today's technology. It's just very expensive today, but it'll come. So his daughter's in another room surrounded by 8 cameras, 8 depth cameras, Kinect-like cameras, and it's capturing her in real time, creating a 3D model of her, and then projecting it to him in this space. And he's wearing a HoloLens so that he can see her in the space. And you may notice her physical space has the same kind of furniture as his physical space, so that when they project her 3D model into his space, she's aligned with the objects in the space very, very precisely. And I'll just point out this lower left view is what he actually sees through the HoloLens. And what we're seeing in the main screen is a reconstruction from a third camera. And they're able to do a little more post-production and add some opacity, which makes this image more realistic than the HoloLens image. But my point here is that this is 3D volumetric capture and real-time transmission of this image, and not the post-production stitching that we saw in the replay TV. And I know this guy, he's a friend of mine from the research community, and he said this is the most emotional experience he's ever had with a computer-mediated communication. And you can well imagine it. And just to show one other aspect of it, they also record it, and so now he's got this 3D recording of this interaction between him and his daughter that he could keep as a memory, for all time. So this could be the future of digital photography, home photography too. So these are the kind of things that I'm excited about, and that we're working on technologies to make possible over the network and consumer phones.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
So
that's good work, right?
Bo was saying that it costs about $100,000
That's
to
right.
do that implementation, but it is a physical product that has been created. Obviously not for mass production, but it looks like it's going to happen. Right. So, Michael, talk about NVIDIA and how you guys are really contributing to the future of entertainment.
Okay, perfect. So Bo had better content and visuals than I'm going to have. I might move my hands a little bit, but look at what he put up because that's kind of cool. So I think most folks know NVIDIA as like a gaming company, and at the heart of VR kind of lives a gamer, I think, everywhere. And how do you get that type of real content into a VR type environment? So NVIDIA, we're sort of a platform company when it comes to virtual reality. We are hardware, as you know, but we're software as well. So the story kind of changes when we get into virtual reality. We're doing everything we can to build up the ecosystem, whether that's haptic devices, HMD companies, application providers. So we do SDKs that can help with rendering. We have technology that's called multi-res shading and lens match shading. VR requirements are so important, so high at a 90 frame per second rate that technology and compute performance really do matter. As I said, how many people are gamers? Anybody game in the audience? So interesting stat, if you're gaming at like an HD resolution, virtual reality is going to take that up. The necessity from a graphics standpoint is going to be taken up 7 times. So NVIDIA, as a graphics company, we love those statistics, and we're trying to do whatever we can. Again, from a software standpoint, we work with partners to help put the SDKs or software development kits into the engines. I think traditional pipelines in content creation, I think customers and our customers are trying to figure out how do they merge that pipeline into VR? Is it another pipeline, or is it somewhere in between, right? Technicolor can kind of attest to that. It's kind of a blend, and I think they're still in the figuring it out days today. But again, from an NVIDIA standpoint, whatever we can do to build the ecosystem from a software, hardware, and support standpoint, that's really what we're doing. Many engines are implementing technology today that we pushed out again to get that 90 frames per second rate up, lower the latency, because I think everybody has done virtual reality or done a few experiences in this room, and there are bad experiences and there are great experiences. And as we want this market to adopt the technology, we need great experiences, right? One and done is not going to grow VR. So we really need to do whatever we can as a technology company to enable the content creators to do as great an experience as possible so the adoption rate really, really increases heavily.
Hey, so this is not necessarily VR entertainment, but can you talk a little bit about what you guys are doing with Tesla and sort of threatening the AR space?
Tesla Motors, if people are familiar with that, Elon Musk, dynamic leader there. We do have a great relationship with them, and this actually is a good tie into virtual reality. And let me get there. I'll eventually get there. I think virtual reality, and the whole artificial intelligence, that line is crossing. And as an example, if you're in a VR experience and you see some avatar or character and you tap them on the shoulder, the fourth time you tap them on the shoulder, push them on the shoulder, in the real world, they're going to react differently than the first time, because that's what a normal human being might do. So how do we know and how do we get content to figure out what a human being is going to figure out? Got to take a lot of data in, kind of do that artificial intelligence work, which leads into deep learning. Okay, so artificial intelligence, large bucket, you then break it down to machine learning, then you break it down to deep learning. That's really where the parallel nature of a GPU comes in. What we're doing with Tesla is we have technology that, again, is based on a chip, but we create a platform. It's called Drive PX, and recently Drive PX2 with an architecture change. What that does, it's the brains that lives inside the car. So with autonomous driving, you start to have as many camera points around the vehicle as possible, and it's collecting as much data as possible, but it needs to compute that. So it's doing radar, it's doing sonar. There's a lot of algorithms that are running in this technology because it needs to interpolate what's happening. Is it a pedestrian? Is it a red light or a green light? And if you think about that, autonomous driving is sort of the grand challenge of compute. But where you can take that as a subset is, just like the car can maneuver around curvy roads, in an AR environment, I can start to do the same type of thing with that technology. I know that I'm going to be turning here, and I know that there's an object in front of me. So that Drive PX and technology that we're working with Tesla on, and they're helping us with, it's only going to, again, push what the reality is and what the necessity is, I should say, of technology, and step that down to AR. And I don't mean step down from a compute standpoint, but a subset, right? Because autonomous driving is really, really difficult. But AR can use some of the things we're doing with Tesla in a personalization standpoint when somebody just has some type of headset or device in their hands.
Cool, it's fascinating. So, Timothy, talk about what's going on in Technicolor.
Sure.
Technicolor Experience Center. How are you guys pushing?
Yeah,
that?
sure. Yeah. So I think the audience is probably familiar with Technicolor. We've been around for about 100 years. We actually invented color. You can go back and look, but it's black and white before we were there. So that was about 105 years ago. And there's kind of a stark similarity between that epoch and what's happening today. I mean, we saw the beginnings of a very transformative medium in color. Technicolor worked with the creative community here in Los Angeles to build the 3-strip color process, which became basically the rudimentary canon of film and film development and filmmaking and film artistry and imagery. And that became one of the hallmarks of television and that medium. But we can look back to radio and TV and film, and there are basically the same threads that we see today in VR. So we have a stark new creative canvas for high-end creative images. We have an absolute a ton of technology coming through from all kinds of different providers. There is an incredible, I guess one thing that is new and different is the startup community in the space is incredibly vibrant, and we are heavily engaged in that discussion and kind of talking to the VR startup community both here in LA and in Silicon Valley and also in Asia. A tremendous amount of not just capital, but also very high-end creative content makers, technologists getting together to understand this new medium, which is fantastic. And then there's companies like NVIDIA and Huawei and others who are investing significant amounts of their capital and corporate development money in providing tools, hardware, Nokia as well, of course, and techniques and know-how into the space. So we kind of sit a little bit here in the middle of that area, and we've made some fairly significant bets of our own in VR because we saw this coming about 3 or 4 years ago. We have a large R&I, Research and Innovation Center in France, where we saw a lot of the kind of the underpinnings of what is today, you know, kind of almost a stitching algorithm or a rendering engine or whatever else that you kind of see is almost commonplace now, or will be. We saw the first inklings of that a few years ago. So we've made some fairly significant bets in the space, and we're going to make some more. But one of the things that you mentioned is the tech. I'll get to that in a second because I don't want to make this a big advertisement about what we're doing quite yet, although I appreciate it. You know, we have kind of a narrative here on a thesis on VR. So our interest is to make this, as my friend from NVIDIA said, we believe this is going to be about high-end, and it's about the high-quality native content. You know, there'll be a lot of content on YouTube, there'll be a lot of Facebook 360, that's great. That's another part of the market that we probably will play around in, but we're not going to focus on. We think the creative imagery part of this, the LA audience here, is focused on the high-end, native, high-quality content. And within that, there are kind of a few other buckets. We believe this is a social medium. That may sound really weird because you sit there with your goggles on in your head and you are isolated at some level. But if you play around with VR a lot, when this experience becomes real to you as a human being is when you're engaging with someone else or an AI that feels like someone else. And that's when you really get really immersed. And you know, I'm the worst father in the world. I have 4 young kids, and I've let them rock and roll on an HTC Vive for like the last 3 or 4 months in their playroom. And they love this thing. I'm probably going to get chastised by everybody for doing that, but they are totally into Job Simulator. But when they get into a role where they're actually doing some role-playing with an AI, such as Gnomes and Goblins, which is fantastic, by the way, they really get immersed. They really love it. And to them, it's like this kind of friend from another planet coming to visit them. It's kind of amazing to see. So when I see that happening, it's amazing. I think this is a disruptive, highly disruptive technology. It's a great medium for us to be involved in. We're very excited about it. I'll be quiet now, and we can get to the tech later.
Sure. I have some follow-up questions in a second. I want to get to Randall. So Randall could not be more accredited as a traditional filmmaker. But now he's got a 360-degree series called Defrost. It's got Carl Weathers, Bruce Davison, Harry Hamlin. It was at Sundance Film Festival and Cannes Film Festival in 2016. Or it's going to Cannes Film Festival happen yet?
It's happening in January, yeah.
Maybe comes this week.
It was at the last conference.
Last one, yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
This year, yeah.
So tell us about why you're doing this and how you're telling stories in this medium and how it differs from your previous experiences.
Well, about 3 years ago, my brother, who's a visual effects supervisor, and he always keeps me up to date on all the creative new things in technology, he showed me the Oculus Rift, and I saw the Tuscan Village demo. Anybody see that? Mm-hmm. Where you walk around a Tuscan village in 3D, and you go upstairs and you look off the side, and it really looks like you're there. And I thought, wow, how do you adapt this to narrative and actors? Because it felt so real. I thought, wow, wouldn't it be great if you could actually see actors in front of you and feel like they're there? I had written a script when I was in college about a woman who's frozen and brought back to life, and I thought this is the perfect material for this because the technology is such that when you're wearing the goggles, you can't talk, you can't move, and what better way to do it than make the viewer the character? And so we shot as an experimental 5-minute show with this script, and I got friends to show up. Carl Weathers, like you said, and Bruce Davison and Chris Atkins all helped because they were friends. And we shot this in one take, and with GoPros. And it turned out really well. We took it to Sundance, and then we decided to expand the story. And I wrote 11 more episodes that continue the story of this woman who's coming out of this frozen state and trying to adjust to 2045, and her family who has all grown up and changed. Her daughter now has a kid, and you know her husband is now much, much older and wants to make love to her, and she's not quite ready because he looks like his father to her. So there's all kinds of drama that happens in this show, and we were lucky enough to have Steve Sklar turn us on to the Ozo. And so we used the prototype of the Ozo. It was the first one, right? The first Ozo thing?
one of the first ones.
One of the first ones. And we shot in stereo the next 12 episodes. And we're now in post on them because, you know, it was the first time it had been used, and there's since then they've developed a lot of ways to make it much easier, but we were making mistakes because nobody had shot with it before, and you know, you're not supposed to get the actors too close to the camera, which we did, because they were coming up to the wheelchair and talking to her, and so that, you know, if you're close, you can stitch really nicely in the front, but the background has you know, stitch lines, and if you stitch the back, then the front, you know. So we're learning. We're kind of like figuring out the rules as we go. And so now we hope to launch these 12 episodes in January. We're not sure where. We're looking for a distribution outlet.
How does the narrative unfold? So as the viewer, you are the main character.
Right.
And then you need someone to go. Is there different tributaries they can take, or is it?
Well, in this series, the first 12 there aren't, but I'm writing 12 more now that are going to use more interesting technology, like the. I'm hoping to do the volumetric capture for the next 12 and try to get her out of the wheelchair, walking around. Yeah, it's interesting because when you're wearing this thing, has anyone seen Defrost here? Okay, one person in the back. Okay, when you're wearing it, and the actors come up and start talking to you and having eye contact with you, it feels like they're really there. And a lot of people get emotionally involved. I mean, Bryan Singer came out of it with tears in his eyes, you know, from the emotional experience of being this woman for 5 minutes. And we've had many older people who are used to when someone talks to you, you talk back. So they're in the thing, and the people are saying, "How are you feeling?" And they're saying, "I'm feeling fine," because they're thinking that they're really there with these people. So it's really been an extraordinary experience seeing how people react to eye contact.
And one last question, like, after doing this, like, what percentage of this would you like do differently? You know, like. You did it, and you're like, oh, I wish I did. I should have done this. I mean,
well, you know, I think what we did caused a lot of problems for us, but I think I wouldn't do it any differently. We're gonna plow through and make it work, because I think you need to have people close and looking right in your face. So yeah, I would do that. But you know, something Tim said about it being an isolated experience. We did an experiment at the Directors Guild in July where we have this thing called Digital Day, and we try experiments. And we put like 30 people in the headsets, and we sync them all up so that they're all seeing the same picture, the same video at the same time. And they didn't wear earphones. We had the sound come to the speakers of the theater, so they could hear each other. If it was a comedy, they could hear each other laughing, or if it was a horror movie, they could hear each other screaming. So it's a combination of this isolated experience and a theater experience. And I think that might be some way for the future for this not to be so isolated.
Mm-hmm.
So Timothy, can you, like, we talked a little bit like what the high-end creative space looks like. Can you kind of expand on that, where you think this is going?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's early days, and it's also not in some ways, right? So we're seeing it. You know, we've done at Technicolor about 30 projects so far in VR, which is kind of staggering considering it's really been around for about 18 months as a medium for storytelling. But it builds on some of the other things that we know and love to do. And so when we kind of bring these creative people in and say, hey, you know, here's VR, here's your first experience, it kind of is mind-blowing. And they kind of go away for a couple of days and think about, I've got a script, or I've got a thing that I want to work on, and this is actually the right medium to do it in. And it's usually, when they come back to us, it's kind of an amazing event, because then there's this whole bunch of ideation. So, you know, we've started, last year we were lucky enough to start working with a company called The Mill, which is part of the family now, and that's a great group of creative people, based worldwide. They're English, but fantastic people. Sound like Donald Trump. Forget that. So they are great people, and but really great at kind of understanding and getting underneath things. And so for us, you know, we started working with them on this thing called a project called Help. which I'm not sure if you guys, it's a Google ATAP project. I'm not sure if anyone's seen it in the audience. Great. Same guy. Okay.
Who's that guy?
He's skewing the, okay, anyway. So that's a project where Google came to us and said, we want to do something in VR. It's really actually more of an iPad kind of tablet, Android, et cetera, tablet-based experience. It's a very short clip. The challenges in building that and bringing all the things together as part of that were mind-blowing. Because we started doing these render shots of, in live capture, and we had to throw all that work away because we weren't happy with how it looked when it was being stitched. And then when you kind of go from one screen to 6, it's not 4 and it's not 360, it's also the floor, it's the ceiling, it's every element of that, and it's round. And making that look great, and then understanding the storytelling problem, which is you're being chased by a monster, but some people look at the monster as they're running away backwards from it. Like, is it near me? Is it coming at me? And so there's a lot of resolution required there, and that's all in CG. Some people freak out and run straight at the door or the wall or wherever else. That has to be stitched the same way and has to be rendered in the same resolution. There's no storytelling, hey, look over here, scary thing, or loud noise, or bright light. Yeah, that's all there. There's police cars, there's choppers. This thing grows from a small egg to like a huge T-Rex type lizard as it's eating subway cars. It's really cool. You need to see it. But the point is, we had to not only invent a bunch of tech underneath that, including, a camera rig that could capture 4-way, and then make that a 6-cubed kind of object. I'm not very technical, I'm sorry, but I'm sure I'm blowing this.
I get it.
But and then stitching and holding that all together in, some significant amount of terabytes. I have the numbers here, but they're mind-blowing. And rendering farms and all kinds of stuff that we had to set up. It's a lot of work. And so we did all that, and that's kind of why we're looking at this. I'll get to the tech in a second, but when we look at quality, we're saying, hey, there's actually a lot of work that goes underneath that you have to then hide. Because quality has to be about not just the willing suspension of disbelief, but the unconscious suspension. That I'm not even aware I'm kind of fooling myself here. I'm just into this. It feels real.
Sounds
And
like
that's-
marriage to me.
When you get there, it's really cool. Yeah. So.
Can I ask him a question on the panel? Can the panel ask
Yes,
questions?
feel free.
So in terms of like high-end also, I kind of think, what I think of high-end is we're kind of getting away from the mobile phone, cardboard kind of thing, and we're getting into premium content experiences,
Yeah.
location-based entertainment, theme park type environments where, when you're paying a premium, that content needs to be the best it can, right? So what do you think about, cell phone versus when somebody's going to pay for an experience, where might that be and how might that get out in the market?
Yeah, I think a lot of our clients are not studios. I mean, obviously we love our studio clients and we do a lot of work with them. But a lot of our clients are actually brands and advertisers. And they're companies who say, look, we actually want to get this out there in a meaningfully different way. And the way to differentiate the product is to differentiate the medium, so we're going to go on a VR pitch or we're going to do an AR pitch. And we've done lots of that work as well. And those are, typically those are in some form of LBE. They're usually kind of in a store, a mall, and they can often be on a cardboard device, or they can be in a small enclosure like with a Vive. And there's a lot of really cool stuff happening in games and theme parks. Into the Void, the Void's doing a ton of stuff. And there's lots of really cool hybrid environments in gaming that are coming up that I think are going to be spectacular. I don't think it's just going to be this, watch a movie doing this and being excited. I think it's going to be watch a new form of entertainment that's much more interactive, be just completely compelled by it. I think the 2-hour movie viewing experience is probably not great, but I think a lot of the things we're going to be seeing for creatives are going to be amazing, and they're going to be a new medium. So we're very animated on this one.
To sort of follow on with that, Randall, where are you distributing your content? I think everybody's struggling with, reaching a larger audience versus having a higher quality experience, right?
Well, we're looking into downloadable, sort of like Netflix, where you have all the episodes up there and you can click on them and look at them one at a time, or binge watch, although they're only 5 minutes each. And we don't know where we're going to distribute yet. we're in negotiations with China at the moment, with a company that wants to buy the rights for China for cell phones. And then we're going to look into all the possibilities for monetization in the rest of the world. But right now, we're just trying to finish it. And then if they build it, if you build it, they will come, is our philosophy. So we don't know who's going to do it.
But I'd love anyone to know, both follow on and what they think the next experience is, and just like what 2017 looks like for VR, 2018, and also, Bo, some of the stuff you've talked about as far as what needs to happen for those experiences to unfold.
Well, I just wanted to say, I think the high-end experience is really within our reach today. That's what's really exciting a lot of technology people, is that a lot of us got into technology because we wanted to make better video games. And today, with these goggles with the stereoscopic view, you really can get there. Now, it's also true that a low-res experience can be very compelling, right? My kids are immersed in Minecraft as the best example. And even a good book, the resolution of that doesn't really matter. But because, like I say, it's within reach to hit these upper limits, I'm just going to throw up some numbers. This is the theoretical upper bound of what the human visual system can consume in the digital equivalent of it. And I won't go through all the numbers, but I'll point out a couple. So if you just think about the head staying still and being able, though, to move your gaze around about 150-degree horizontal and 90-degree vertical field of view, the resolution that your fovea can ingest is equivalent to about, between 400 and 500 megapixels. That's per eye, per frame. And now, there's debates about what's the max frame rate that the human visual system can consume, but I'm going to pick 120 as pretty high end. Right now, gamers expect 90, and so 120 is just, a step up beyond that. Some people argue, though, it should go even higher. But anyway, if you think 120 frames per second per eye, that's 3.7 terabits per second for both eyes. That's the max limit. That's not what's necessary for a compelling experience, but this is what we can imagine the technology needing to meet in 5 years, not next year.
What's possible now, would you say?
Well, so today we can get a really compelling VR experience, 360 video using cube representation. You could squeeze it down to like 20 megabits per second. But to have high end, you want like 100 megabits per second. And let me say, most homes have a connection of about 10 megabits per second. And the US government, I've forgotten which agency, but one of the agencies does this projection of what the infrastructure is going to need to be in 5 years. Their projection of infrastructure need is only 20 megabits per second to the home. And that's not going to be adequate for streaming VR content, because we need 100 megabits per second for the high end. Yeah. And that's for today's resolution at 4K per eye. If we look at future resolution requirements, if we really want to get complete digital immersion, we're going to need things that approach these numbers. And I'll just point you here that if we this is the raw data rate, but you can compress it at really high compression ratio of 300 to 1, get it down to 12 gigabits per second, and sometimes lower than that too.
So compression is really the key to the future of this business?
Yeah, but we have good compression technologies, and it's going to iterate. Really, the compression isn't as important as the data representations. Like, is it cubic? Is it spherical? Is it volumetric? All of those things matter more than the actual compression.
Yeah, I mean, to give you an idea on some of the stuff we didn't help, which is, I think, kind of a nice representation. It's about 4 minutes long. So it's 200 terabytes of total compressed storage. There are 15 million rendered frames that we went through to make it, which is astounding. There was 500,000 hours of usage of our farm, which is kind of the back lot where we do all the digital production. We ran 20,000 hours of simulation on our models to do all this work. And the final thing is, it's 10,000 frames. It's a single piece because there's no edit, there's no cut. It just runs. but because it's cubic, it's actually 60,000 frames. So you get this, when you start to think about, okay, taking the single screen and blowing it out, that is, exponentially more difficult. So the overall effort was 80 people for 13 months to complete across the planet. Yeah. So it's a lot of work, obviously, to do that. Yeah, it's 4 minutes.
Well, so the experience has to be dramatically different enough for people to pay for all this extra production.
Yeah, and I'd say, look, we learn a lot, right? That was the first of its kind in the industry. So when we did that, it was like, okay, let's make this as good as we possibly can. I wouldn't say money was not the object, but frankly, we learned this as kind of a big experience in learning and learning by doing. There's not like you can go to school. You can't go to VR school, right? So you have to actually do it and learn it. And so that was a really big part of it. It was actually getting our people involved in it early so they could actually become experts.
Speaking of VR schools, there's a guy named Servat Yurli who's from CryEngine, and he's funding 40 VR schools around the world in film schools.
Yeah.
And what I found is that, there's the students who are learning this are just as much experts as the people in our field, because nobody's done this before. So it's an even playing field for students and professionals.
Yeah, exactly.
I also think, Digital Hollywood, we're media entertainment folks in this industry, and it's interesting how a lot of the work that this group is doing when it comes to VR is outside this industry, right? Automobile manufacturers can build great cars, but they don't really know how to tell a story. And when you're immersed in a sales scenario for VR for a car, I think the Hollywood studios are the ones that can help produce content for those companies. So it's interesting how this market can expand potentially out of this market. And I do think that's the first step to revenue here, possibly outside of M&E. It's into other markets such as manufacturing where VR is starting to take off, but they don't really know how to tell the story. Agree, maybe?
Totally.
Yeah, I wanted to comment on the storytelling actually, because I wanted to share some thoughts how this industry evolved the last 2 years even. I remember when I studied 2 years ago in the VR industry, I was told, do not move the camera, everything has to be all in one take. And we have done a lot of experiments with the creative industry, with Randall and others, and bigger Hollywood studios as well, about how to change that and experiment with, for example, the point of view storytelling, what Randall done in Defrost, but we also use that in Argos, our other piece. Basically, you become somebody else. The Argos piece is reliving somebody else's memory who got murdered in a crime, and you become that person. You slide down, you get violence against you, you get love against you, so you become that person, and that's very unique with VR. But I also wanted to mention about the storytelling, the guidance, how important it is to guide the audience, the viewer, in that 360 space. So the viewer can look anywhere. They can look behind or, all around them. But it is very important for the director and the writer to think about the guidance. So you make sure they look at the right place at the right time. So you can actually deliver a story. So we used, for example, jibs and cable cams for a music video where we transported the viewer from a boys' room to a girls' room across an alley. So we stopped over the street where there were other people doing other things. So they could still have a freedom to look around in 360, but they're sort of guided to different spaces by the different camera rigging technology.
Right. I think also, and I've heard this in a few sessions yesterday as well, audio. Everybody VR, like, what's the graphics need? What do I do? And how many pixels can I throw at the screen? Audio is the cue to tell the story.
Absolutely.
Right? Because from a directorial standpoint, if you want somebody to look over the shoulder because that's where the content, you got to draw them there. And, I think sometimes when we start doing VR production, maybe we don't think about audio like on day one, but we should, because that's sort of, it can't get completed unless the audio is part of that experience.
Yeah, and we focus a lot on audio at Nokia as well. So spatial audio, we try to make sure every piece we create have a spatial sound mix, and yeah, it's very important. I agree. that's another tool to guide the user.
Yeah, directing VR 360 narrative content is very much like directing a play where the audience can look anywhere they want. So you use light and sound and direction. Like if everyone looks that way, you want to see what are they looking at, you know? Stuff that you'd use as a play director.
Yeah. One of the things we're going to, I just want to mention this, the tech thing since you kicked it off. I mean, we really believe this is the time for the industry to come together. And we believe very strongly in content creation, consumption, distribution, aligning here around VR. One of the things we're going to do to help that is we're opening up a center in Culver City to try to get the best creative people, the best technologists, the best distribution technology into that center. It's essentially, I'm not sure exactly how we're going to structure it. It's going to be a non-profit that we set up. It's not aimed at making money. Obviously, it is aimed to float the VR boat for all of us.
Sorry, I didn't get that.
Siri didn't get that. Could you repeat what you said?
Repeat
When I
for
said
Siri.
non-profit, I think so. Yeah. So, but that's the idea. I mean, the idea is really for us to try to work through and get best practices established, but really to build a place for high-end creative and high-end technology in VR to be assembled and to be developed. And that's one of the things that we announced recently. We'll have some further follow-up announcements when we're ready, but very soon in Culver City.
Awesome.
So, Pokemon Go, really great example of location-based technology, kind of introduced people, sort of making AR a household word. Everyone's paying attention to it. My kids are obsessed with it. I'm sure if you have children, they are. If you have adults, they're probably obsessed with it too. But people, in the AR space are saying that it's really not what AR is about. Like, what do you got? Anyone want to take this question? Like, where you think the killer apps are for AR, maybe in entertainment?
I love to talk, so I'll start first, I suppose.
Okay.
So I think in AR, first I'll do a little NVIDIA story. So GPU, right, whether it's a high-end graphics thing that does visual effects or high-end VR, take that down to a system on a chip or a SoC. We also have products like that. So we work with like Athere Labs, GameFace Labs, and other folks in that industry. I think that AR might be a little bit more relevant in like maintenance and somebody in the field trying to do a repair of an engine. I think that's happening today. I think medical could be another area. I definitely think that the enterprise will be a larger AR space, and then you'll have the anomaly like Pokemon Go that brings it back into the consumer world. And I think that'll kind of ebb and flow. But I think the enterprise, like I said, manufacturing, you could be on a shoot and you could be doing AR with a tablet of characters that aren't there yet, but you want them to be there. So you're kind of seeing what the film might look like. So I think there's areas in entertainment and many industries, but I think it'll be enterprise. And NVIDIA does feel that AR will be growing and will eventually be bigger than what the VR market is.
Let me pick up from there too, because I've wrestled with this too. I'm a Pokemon Go fan, I love it, but it's not what I thought AR was going to be, which was more about aligning digital information onto physical objects in the real world. So I think the enterprise applications are clearly valuable to those people because they need their hands to be free and they need digital information to help them complete whatever task, whether it's medical or some technical installation or repair. So that's a clear value proposition there. Now in the consumer space, I've wrestled. So there's mixed reality games. That's pretty compelling. Is it compelling enough to spend $300 to $500 on a headset and wear it? Not sure, but there's another category in consumer, which is really similar to the enterprise, which is things like how-to videos. Now, I'm a big do-it-yourselfer, not everybody is, but a lot of people are, and YouTube is just chock full of all these how-to videos, and I just love it, right? Well, if you think about putting those into augmented reality, giving people a capture system that lets them align digital information with their how-to instructions, that's really powerful. And then you've got an opportunity for user-generated content like YouTube, and that's when the media is going to explode, when the users are uploading tons of small little pieces of content that people can use. And I just want to give one example. I was at Stanford. They had a class on making apps for augmented reality. They had a bunch of HoloLenses that Microsoft donated to them. And the best one I saw was really cool, was a piano tutorial. And it was great because, you had the HoloLens on and you could see the keys, the physical keys, a real piano, not a digital one. And it was showing little scrolling bars to show you which key to press, and it was timed, kind of like Guitar Player, but on a piano, and it was really powerful. I could easily imagine using that to learn how to play a physical piano.
That's amazing. Great example.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
sometimes if you've ever gotten anything from Nokia and you have slot A, slot B,
Yeah,
that would be perfect.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Not Nokia, I meant, what? IKEA, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
That would be
IKEA.
great.
Same
An
country.
AR app to put together your IKEA furniture.
Yeah.
Eric, I'd like to try surgery as well.
Brain surgery, yes.
But anybody, any questions from the audience? Anybody? Yes.
With the ozone, so what you were saying about audio, about like people moving their heads and it having to follow like the space, how is the ozone like being able to, I don't know if I'm explaining this right, but if I move my head.
Yeah, I understand what you're asking.
it's-
Yes.
It's very rudimentary, like it's only
Yeah.
these 4 points.
So you will hear, if you turn your head and the sound is coming from a certain direction, you will hear that sound from the same direction. So when you turn your head, you will still hear the sound where it's coming from.
And they're doing that a little bit, but I noticed that there's only really 4 points. There's front, back, side to side. Is the Ozo able to kind of get at 45-degree angles, or is that still? And
So
like, how
Ozo
do you-
captures eight sources of audio. So it really depends on the post mix, the spatial audio mix, how you use those 8 channels, and you can render an ambisonic or any other format that you heard maybe on one of the demos.
And is there a way to implement that with like all the different kinds of goggles and stuff like that that you can wear?
Well, it really depends on the platform, what the platform is capable of playing back. Some platforms today still have limitations of stereo or mono audio only, so very few of them support the spatial audio. So it's really not on the app or the goggles. It's more on the app and the platform, how it's capable of playing it back.
Samsung VR has that spatial audio. They work, it really works well.
Right, and we have tools that sort of mimic what we do in light fields and path tracing, how light bounces off glass and cars and things like that. So we're taking that also to audio, because the way that I sound in this room with these walls would be different than the way I sound outside in the open area. So the technology, again, what we do, tool set, has to go into some type of engine of sorts to be put together with Ozo and technologies like that. So some way, somehow, people actually need to put it together before the final experience gets put out.
That's amazing. Right there?
Two questions. First of all, I want to make sure I understood that a passive view of live action is at a higher quality because you're not moving up, you're just sitting there with the headset on, and so you should be able to eventually have a much better quality of that experience, and it's an active view of the movie. Is that correct?
He said, so I think the question is the post view of live action being rendered in such high definition in VR applications will be a much richer experience.
Oh, are you?
No, your screen showed, if you're not moving,
You talking about this volumetric video kind of stuff?
It was the slide when you...
Okay,
Sorry.
wonderful.
Yeah, I'll go back to that. Yeah, this one.
right,
Oh,
you seem to be saying that it is not, it's a passive, it's not
Oh.
active participation in it, that you're able to absorb more information and at a higher quality.
All I'm trying to show, I was just trying to do a calculation to find out what my lab's maximum compression requirements will ever be, so I'm taking I'm just making a simplification of imagining somebody not moving their head as a first step, and that's where I come up with this. But then if you add head and body rotation, then the horizontal field of view becomes 360, and the vertical field of view, I'm imagining, is 180, just up to down, right? So that's when you hit this number. This is compressed. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, you know what? I forget this mode of PowerPoint always throws me off. Where's that pointer thingy?
But I think what you're saying is, I mean, it doesn't really matter, right? Because you're going to have
There
to
we go.
stitch and render that anyway.
Here.
You're going to have to show all that, the cube, regardless.
Yeah,
If you're showing a live
that's right.
a concert,
Yeah,
okay, where somebody is in a set position watching,
right.
that would be better, higher quality technical experience
Well,
than if you move it around.
It would be
Okay.
less work.
right.
If
It
you're fixed.
will be higher quality probably because one of the ways we're going to compress the cube is the parts you're not looking at, we're going to send in low resolution, really low resolution. So what you're looking at will be high resolution. If you turn your head though, it'll be low resolution for an instant and then it'll snap to a higher resolution, right? So it's adaptive resolution.
The second question was, everybody's real excited about VR for live action sports.
Right.
Thus far, as best as I can tell, it's been a huge disappointment. And I don't attribute that to the shortcomings of VR, I attribute it to what Ms. Anderson said about people in sports not understanding how to use VR properly and being afraid of actually having motion on the camera and doing cuts and things of that nature. What is your take on what should be one of the largest immersive experiences in the world for sports around the globe, and other than very contained like cage fighting, boxing, and wrestling, it's very hard for people to grasp how to do production.
Let me say one thing about it. I was talking to somebody at Fox about that question, and his point was, he said, look, the producers are telling a story. Sports is also about telling a story, but they're telling it's kind of, I equate it to like a soap opera. You know, you got to know the backstory of the players, all their stats, or the rivalry between the teams and all that. And the producers are exploiting those story elements when they select what view to present you, okay? So most consumers, they believe, and I don't really know, but most consumers really want that. They want to be told a story. Now the thing is, even if that's true, I think there are multiple stories to be told. So right now we've got one network who's producing one storyline, but in the future, if you expose these camera feeds, then you could have multiple people telling different stories. You know, maybe that's only 2% of the viewership wants to tell a story, but even at that level, and I use 2% because that's about the percentage of the population that uploads to YouTube or posts on Facebook, you know. So even at 2%, that's a whole bunch of new storylines that could be told and broadcast.
And it's different camera positioning than traditional television. And, you know, you don't want to just be going, you know, you don't want to be at the 50-yard line watching a football game. You kind of want to be all over it. You want to be on the field, right? So I think the challenge still might be position, camera technology, and how do you get immersed in a traditional environment like football, so to speak.
So
But-
I like to say that also is like a human, you know, it doesn't zoom, so that's one of the big differences between the broadcast cameras and VR cameras, not just also,
If you use cable cam, if you use gyms, there's absolutely no reason.
right, you move it closer. That's what I'm saying, it's like a human. If I want to see what's going on over there out in the corridor, I'm going closer to see it like a human. So you have to bring it closer on a jib or a techno crane or, you know, or a cable cam or whatever, and you have to use multiple cameras like you do in traditional broadcast around the field as well.
If I can have one last comment. One last, I would think it would be much better if they incorporated what I would call a flying carpet mentality for a sports fan, which is as if they had a flying carpet and could go anywhere in the stadium at any one time to watch an event. That's where you want to be in VR. And I think it can be done.
Absolutely. You just have to have enough cameras to put it
Or a
everywhere.
drone.
Or a drone, or,
Yeah. So with that, we are out of time. We would like to thank the audience for participating, and thank you guys.
Thank you.